Welcome to the Feminine Principle podcast, heart-centered conversation for soul-centered women who are on a path of self-discovery. I'm your host, Nicola, shamanic practitioner, shadow and soul integration coach, and the creatrix behind the Feminine Principle, supporting women to redefine the relationship they have with themselves, others, and Mother Earth through the magic hidden in their unconscious. For more information, please visit thefeminineprinciple.com. Hello ladies, today I'm joined by Jessica Dornborg as we explore Persephone, queen of the underworld, and how her journey is a symbolic rite of passage for all women, as we move from the victim archetype through the bonds of the mother to the abduction of our soul's essence by the patriarchal shadow, and come full circle through the darkness to know our own truth and depth of who we are as the sovereigns of our own internal kingdom. Jessica is a shamanic evolutionary astrologer and creatrix of Temples of the Moon, who is known as a cosmic channel who connects the above and the below.
Thank you, Nicola. Thank you for having me.
Okay, so tell us, who is Persephone? Who is she? What does she do? What's her story?
Yeah, okay. So I think I'd like to start a little bit by just mentioning, like my understanding around the archetypes, and basically I feel like they're all within us, and then there are some that each of us are really going to be embodying or expressing or feeling, and some of the main female or goddess archetypes that we see have to do with the mother, the daughter, the wife, which is Demeter is the mother, Hera is the wife, and Persephone is the daughter. And then there's Aphrodite or Venus, and she's known more as being the independent, creative muse. So she sort of has one foot in being partnered and being independent and free. And then there are what are considered the virgin goddesses, which are the ones that are free and whole to themselves. They're not partnered. And this is like Artemis and Hestia and Athena. And that's like the aunt, and Artemis is the sister, and Athena is the father's daughter. And they have more of this independent nature. So when we're looking at Persephone and the mother and the wife, these are what's called the vulnerable goddesses, because basically they're at the mercy of others or partnership, and basically the psyche of others. So what makes Persephone most unique, and we see it a lot in women, because it really embodies or expresses this reality of humanity that we're experiencing around the patriarchy and the suppression or the repression of the feminine. She has a lot to do, of course she's the queen of the underworld. She knows her way around the dark, around the deep, deep psyche, around pain and suffering. We come to see as we unravel her story. And I think it'd be nice to just like go through her story, and the symbolism is so powerful, from like the pomegranate and the rape and the lie that she told her mother, and what all this means. But she is the one that we see so much in women that has to do with the deep suffering through trauma and pain. And she's the one that really shows us the journey through what we could call like the neuroses or the psychoses that we deal with. So she is the one that is going so deep, and there's that experience with many women of, these ideas of losing it or going off the deep end, or you can't handle it, or it's too much. And, many of us experience that. So the deep pain and suffering is what Persephone really has to do with, more so than any of.
And so is that kind of, when you talk about the psychosis, is that kind of when we walk that very thin line between sanity and insanity?
Yes. And that's what the underworld is the expression of, going into such deep darkness, going into the deep fears, going into basically insanity, where we can find the insanity of humanity, of our own psyche, of the ones around us, of the relationships we've had, of the experiences that have been done to us, or our family, or just culture and history. It's all there.
So this really plays into the victim archetype.
Exactly. So Persephone has a lot to do with being the victim, and how difficult that can be to rise above. Obviously that's a very powerful archetype or energy that many, many people are living with. And that has to do with, being out of touch with one's own power. And again, being at the mercy of something that we think is more powerful outside of us, or also just being so vulnerable that we feel paralyzed by it, by usually the pain and suffering or the circumstances. Persephone has a lot to do with the type of person or woman, or this quality in the psyche that is, it's passive. It's okay with giving themselves away. And it's like she's doesn't take action, she's acted on. So it's not going to be entirely, right? We can still be in touch with our power and our creativity, because we have other aspects of ourselves that we're also activating and integrating. A woman can also be very strong in many other various types of archetypes, but when the Persephone one is strong and you can see it playing out, there is that tendency to sort of wait for something or someone to make life happen for them. The other symbolism of Persephone is what's called the core, Kore, which is the eternal child. So that really expresses a lot in that, in her too, because she's just so willing to stay innocent, to stay sort of governed by either her husband, her partner, or in a lot of cases, the mother. So the mother archetype is commonly like that energy of mother knows best. The wife archetype is full of expectation. Sort of the shadow of the wife is expectation. The shadow of the mother is mother knows best. And the shadow of the daughter is to just remain passive.
And do what she's told.
To not claim one's independence, one's own sovereignty. So as is told, right, the myth of her is that, she's the young maiden. She's basically, she's ready to be initiated into being the woman. This is the age that she is. And as it goes, she's out in the fields with the flowers, just, frolicking about in all her innocence and beauty. And the earth opens up, and up comes Hades or Pluto and basically takes her and abducts her and takes her into the underworld and claims her as his wife and rapes her and basically this has to do with that, the opening of the earth and going down into the underworld is, that initiation into, she's ready for the depth of her psyche. She's ready to move from the naivety and into the darkness, which is the source of her power and wisdom. Like, we have to realize that this is her destiny, right? As Persephone, like she already is a woman who is deeply receptive and deeply in touch with what it's like to be an alchemist within all that she can feel. She's a very psychic woman, very emotional. That's the other sort of neuroses that come with that, right? Opposed to like energy like Athena. Athena is this, she's the warrior, the father's daughter. She's typically like the strategist and about wisdom. She looks like the lawyer or the businesswoman, someone that bringing in that father masculine energy and that real powerful mind energy. She's like, Athena is not overwhelmed by emotion. That's more, the Athena woman is more not emotional, and often the Athena woman has something to learn from the Persephone archetype of how to go deeper, be in touch with more emotion. And so on the other side, the Persephone is, can learn from Athena how to come out of the depth of all of the emotion and feeling and the receptivity to others. So as she, she goes down, and then the rape, obviously, there's different ways to look at it, but it basically has to do with the shadow of the masculine and the patriarchy, this energy of taking and stealing and having and all of that. And, but it also shows like this initiation into, the deep psyche and how she's going to evolve into her power through trauma. This is like the signature that came to her. And this is we see this in the other goddesses that have to do with the wife and the mother. They are the ones that go through the trauma. Birth itself can be a very traumatic experience, birthing a child, and how that can also be such a powerful initiation in our psyche to like the next level of wisdom and our own inner power or sovereignty. So we see that, and what I find really interesting about this story is when she gets to, she goes into the underworld. He has claimed her now, and she's told not to eat the pomegranate, because if she does, then she will be stuck with him. It will seal her fate. And she chooses to eat it. So we can see in that, like she's choosing it. She chose to be there. The pomegranate is a symbol of pleasure for one, or divinity, or the forbidden. It's often associated with forbidden. So, and sexuality. So there's that revealing there that she wants it. She knows that it's something that she needs. And when she returns to her mother, she's allowed, as the story goes, she's allowed to come back to the earth, because the mother went into deep suffering. And as the mother, Demeter is, provides all the sustenance of life for all of the earth, all of the gardens and the wheat and whatnot. She, the mother refused to let anything grow in her suffering. So as a agreement from this lord of the underworld to the mother of the earth, he agreed to let her come up for like a season. So she lied to her mother when her mother asked her if she had ate of the pomegranate, and she lied and said no. So to me, this is really shows how that lie is, it really has to do with the desire to separate from the mother, to be independent, and, to claim one's self-control. And we can see that if we look into often why people lie, it's because it gives us a sense of control. In a lot of cases, people who have issues with lying, their lives can be quite out of control, or they've lost control through trauma and whatnot. And it's one way that to regain that. So and that just
Sorry, can I just ask, so the rite of passage, could this, Persephone, when she goes under, could this be kind of likened to when we reach menarche? So in our physical lives, because that's the moment when we separate from the mother and we're wanting to go and taste the forbidden fruit, but it's also that shadow side of the masculine coming into our sexual kind of energy and giving it away. As many women do at that age, because we don't have any sexual teachings and how to engage with our sexual power. Is that kind of something similar?
Yeah, and I think also within that is that often women have really difficult cycles, right? They have difficult menses, right? Because there is so much that is not resolved or balanced within the psyche. So that also has to do with that, like that time going into the dark and getting a taste of feeling a bit crazy, feeling a bit out of center. Because of such deep emotion or chaos. She is the goddess of chaos above all of them. Right? She's just whirling. And this is why she becomes the queen of the underworld. She becomes the guide. So, she is the one that, that whole energy around being the guide, like one who is capable of moving through these dark realms successfully. And that's in a lot of us women, right? A lot of us are going through such deep, having to transmute so much shadow and so much pain and trauma within that it can be so weakening in the moment and in the life experience, but we all know that as we survive it, we do come out on the other side more powerful and more able and apt to know how to traverse the territory better next time, right? And eventually people, women will come, a lot of like psychologists and just women who are in a space of counsel in some way with other women or with people have this archetype really strong, having suffered through a lot of deep, dark psyche. And
it's been able to also to transfer, to go through that chaos, to come out the other side, and how not to lose ourselves within that chaos, I should imagine.
Mm-hmm. She's also about, she's ultra receptive. So that's her power and that's her weakness. So in the shadow of that, she's this quality within a woman that is very like malleable, especially with the man or the partner, to connect herself with men and become what they want. So it has to do also with being that younger, that core kind of archetype, and also because the mother energy has to do with, often this mother energy is keeping the child or molding the child and not allowing the child to be independent. So we also see that in this story. so when that's going on, or when that's part of like releasing that the mother, and it doesn't always have to be that the woman had a mother that they were so close to, or that tried to control them. It can actually be the other aspect of that, where the mother herself was tormented. A lot of times that's what we see, that the mother suffered so much in her own pain and trauma, and the child or the woman has now carried that. And that also is hard to break free of. So it always comes down to the bond. The Persephone archetype is about being so deeply bonded, so deeply like merged. It's codependency, of course. That's really the root of it. And just losing oneself to another. And so becoming invisible, losing the desire to be more than just what you are to him or to your partner. So in her power, she's a vessel that others come to basically realize themselves, or be reflected back to, or to, in sexual situations, or, real partnerships. Like often we see the man who has difficulty with their own emotions and is attracted to this ultra receptive, psychic, emotional kind of woman who's going to transmute and reflect all of the emotional energy. And it's like that's her role. That's what she's so good at. But of course, like when you're taking on that much emotion, and she just gets overwhelmed. And so that's where we really see the the need to reclaim herself, not give herself away, to take action in her life, to remedy the not being the forever child, to basically to grow up and be the woman. So the Persephone archetype can stay quite young and naive for a long time into their journey, as a woman. And so, even though, of course, we always see like different aspects, it can be a very successful woman who is in touch with her power. And yet there's just certain patterns that keep coming in. Constant victimization, because we see it a lot in very powerful women who are, women who are very empathic, very emotional, healers, light workers, these kind of women who are just so receptive and sensitive and doing so much personal work and transmuting all kinds of stuff for themselves in the world. And where this constant returning to the victim. And it's interesting to talk about, because you and I have been talking about it, where just recently we have dove into our own returning to the victim's place. So it's almost like, I don't know, it is something that we're doing here on this planet. So I don't know how much we're, to be totally resolved of it is, I'm not sure when we're going to get there. But that's what we see with this, even when the woman is becoming more and more in touch with her own empowerment and sovereignty, these cycles of the emotion comes in so strong, or her going so deeply into another, this going, often like the healer energy is to go and like take on, and then becoming overwhelmed.
And losing herself again.
Mm-hmm. Persephone is also said to be the shadow of Venus, or the shadow of Aphrodite. So there's that energy there of Venus, or Aphrodite is also known to be the alchemist. She's like the muse. the creative woman. So when the creative woman is not creative and in her creative power, or when she's, Venus or Aphrodite is also partnered, but the difference with her story is she doesn't lose herself in the other. She's more of the woman who's not non-attached, but she can move on. The Persephone woman, it's very difficult to move on.
So this is kind of like where, Persephone is kind of like the codependent, then Venus or Aphrodite would be the one who's interrelated, that can be there, present in the relationship, but can also step away from it and be fully present in herself.
Exactly. She hasn't lost herself. She doesn't lose herself in it. So, it's a different kind of person, and we can see it where some women are just, it's so deep within them to just go to the man, or to the child. It can come out like that too, where the Persephone woman just gives everything to her children, and at the sacrifice of her own work or her own healing or her own self-care,
her dreams.
It's a compulsion. I've actually had this very strong, where it's just, I'm so there for taking care of these little beings. There's so much in me that feels it so naturally to do this. And then I have to remember, like, to balance out the energy. So that's also a way that it can show up, not just with the man or the partner, but women who sacrifice themselves for their children. And of course, there we see the mother archetype coming through again. It's all one.
So this kind of makes sense then when we go through our physical rites of passage. So we've gone from menarche, which is when maybe Persephone is taken underground, and then we find ourselves in the shadow side of the patriarchal structure, and being raped and abused, etc., by that dominant power that's above us, kind of thing. And then, like you say, it's about coming back into growing up, becoming the woman. And so when we're moving then through into kind of menopause and we're going into that crone stage, that's also kind of like when we're becoming the sovereign, as Persephone becomes the queen of the underworld. Even though we might, we can go through those cycles at different times of our life. I mean, they're always working through us and with us. But in theory, physically, that's how it would be perceived, going from the maiden to the mother to the crone, the wise one.
Right. And like you said, it doesn't have to take that long. It doesn't have to go, you don't have to become the queen or the crone into your older years. When we look at the evolution of the archetypes of the shadow into, the divine expression of the higher self in these archetypes, with both Pluto or Hades and her, it basically evolves into the divine sacred tantric union is what it becomes, because the evolution of Persephone has to do with becoming the queen and the guide of the underworld. It's basically coming to know and trust one's own power, that we can move through these excruciating dark places and go into the depth of ourselves, and we can also hold space for others, becoming that alchemist, trusting our power, that we do have this ability to transmute energy, and we can not attach to it. That's the other thing, like learning how to allow it, like it is us, our trauma is a part of us, so not detaching, but learning how to sort of flow, right? Like I think most of us can understand when we're in a really deep place, it can be a day, it can be days, it can be weeks, but just being in that place rather than the victim, the extreme overwhelm, the losing self, to just come into that place of this is what we do. This is
Ownership.
what we do. We are women, we feel, we transmute, we move these, we transform this pain into some kind of understanding. And then we also clear our psyches of these imprints, right? These patriarchal imprints and these patterns. So it's entirely up to us to recreate new patterns within, because we also know how powerful patterns are. Pattern of the victim, like we can just get in it and sort of stew in it for days, you know, like the depression and the suffering, and it's like it takes so much effort and inspiration. Like when we think about Venus being the higher archetype, like we really need to remember, you know, that we can tap inspiration, we can tap this power within that is within us, and it can help to move us out, to transmute, you know, doing anything, getting up and dancing, music, whatever your thing is that like moves you out of a place, rather than staying in the suffering, which is what the Persephone, the shadow of Persephone does. Staying in the suffering, and also staying focused outside herself and on the other or on the suffering, rather than like her divine power as this receptive being. That's really the greatest quality of her, that she's receptive, and that's what we all are.
Yeah.
So and that moving into that divine aspect of the union between the two, you know, evolving that, and it becomes this place where like the masculine energy ends up being this symbolism of, you know, holding the container, you know, like bringing her down into the depth and holding this container for her to, you know, to do what we do as women.
And that's really interesting, because that's kind of how I feel my own relationship. You know, because I have Nicola, we've been together a long time, but he is that container. So I'm the one that crumbles and, you know, goes to all those depths, but he's always the one that's holding that container together, so that when I do come back up, it's kind of like, oh, I'm still here, and I'm rooted because of him. But it helps to give us that freedom, you know, to unravel, but to also know that you're safe within it. But also at the same time, not to lose yourself within the relationship.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's really beautiful. That's the other quality of that, you know, the evolving that shadow of the man into the man that's doing no harm, having that intention to do no harm.
Yeah. And so when you talk about sexual union, when you're talking about the tantric union between them, it is simply about that. It's about it, because, you know, we always get a bit mixed up between Eastern and Western Tantra, whereas one focuses on the physical act and the, you know, the sexual act, but whereas, you know, in ancient esoteric terms, it is about that union also within of the sacred masculine and the sacred feminine coming back into balance. And so is this kind of how you're talking about it in regards to Persephone and Hades and Pluto?
Yeah, exactly. It's the merging of the two, right, into this, you know, because Pluto or Hades is the lord of the underworld. So in essence, it shows that this is a very emotional man, which we see on the planet is that, of course, we're both, right? Masculine, feminine, men have emotions, and men are receptive and feel all these things too. But the conditioning of, you know, not feeling it, not dealing with it, not taking care of one's own deep psyche or emotions. And so therefore that also, it shows up in like where he has to go and take her, you know, take her in and claim her. And yeah, it's like that's it, what's happening in such a enormous way on the planet still, where men are just the division of the masculine feminine. So yes, that is what I'm talking about.
And so, yes, it's also on an individual level, but also on you can quite clearly see all acting out on a collective level as well. Because we're all identified with this victim in some way, shape, or form. We've all got trauma. We all come from that traumatized aspect of self. And then when we put it all together, we can really take a step back and see how it's all playing out, just in our relationships close to home, but also in the wider spectrum. And so it seems to be that right now it's all just seems to be coming to the surface, and we're all becoming more aware of it.
Mm-hmm. It also shows up in how we, we project so much outside of ourselves. So that's also what Persephone is symbolizing or teaching, how when we lose ourself, when we lose that connection with our inner source of self, and we just project everything outside and this neediness for the other person, or making them the source of all our suffering, right? We do that often, like our parents, what they did to us, or the relationships, or these things, like we look outside. And so it's also about that, how we can really get lost in making them the source of our troubles. And of course, we've been pained by people, so we can recognize that, but we also do have this way of carrying our pain forward into our next relationships, right? And and the whole energy around the victimhood, but also abandonment and rejection, these things that so many of us have gone through, whether, from our parents and then in our relationships, and we just sort of get attached to them. Like, here it is again, I've attracted in another partner who's rejecting me, doesn't have time for me, I feel abandoned, I feel alone, I feel so lonely. All of these deep, deep psyche experiences. And then it comes down to like, well, how well have we not abandoned ourselves, not rejected ourselves, taking care of ourselves? What most of us are not very good at this, right? We're all learning how to care for ourselves and how to understand how to like self-love and all of it. So that's also very prevalent amongst many of us, to just keep projecting out. And that again is, we see that she's just so focused on the other, the loss of self into another, whether it is the actual person or it's the abandonment itself. Some people are walking around, many of us, I can identify with a lot of these ways of just feeling so alone and so, rejected, or it's incredible how we sort of keep the engine going. And that also goes into the energy or the reality around the idea of the alchemist. Like, we are like these engines, right? We're fueling energies, whatever energies we choose to fuel, we're fueling it. So if we just want to sit and focus on divine love and how much we like care and can nurture ourselves all day long, we're fueling that engine. But most of us are not doing that. We're sort of plagued by fears and negative feelings and thoughts.
So this is really where she comes into her sovereign queen, which is when she starts to have that awareness of self and how she is continuously giving herself away to everybody else and not paying attention to herself. So again, we go back to that choice. We always have a choice. The thing is that most of us are always making those choices unconsciously. Even if we choose to go after the same guy and give our power away, we are still unconsciously choosing it. But in that moment, in her rite of passage, where she's going from that, that codependent to that independent woman, she's actually becoming more into awareness and seeing things and saying, okay, well, wait a second, I actually have a choice in how I work with this. Even when she took the pomegranate.
It's like this compulsion to bond, the compulsion to give oneself away at the expense. A lot of women will do this, like to meet the man, and the man is so amazing, and they're, so whatever they are, and their masculinity or their mental intelligence, and just to fall into that energy with the person and be sort of enamored by it, because it's just something to not that it's only just something to bond to, but there is that nature of that archetype that just wants to connect itself to something, the bond, so that it can have that relationship with something outside of it, because that is also her power. Her power is that she relates, that she is receptive, meaning she reflects back to people. So she's meant to do it. But again, the whole Venus archetype says, like, well, don't lose your creativity, don't lose your inspiration. And that ends up being sort of the tool for her, is to remain inspired by yourself, by your own gifts, by your own qualities. A lot of women forget or stop doing their own thing, and they give it all to the child, or they give it all to the man, and now they don't do their creative things anymore. They stop seeing friends. It's just all about the guy or something like that. It's just so common.
But even in business, we can give ourselves to business as well.
To work.
Our work, our careers, anything. Not necessarily just the man, but to anything that's out there. So we don't have to kind of deal with ourselves.
The working thing is more like, because the Persephone woman often has a hard time working, because the emotions are so strong. Like we see, like the like the Athena woman, that strong warrior, father's daughter kind of energy, that is she's the workaholic, or she's really business oriented, or she's motivated, she has ambition, she's working, she's going to make something, she's going to do it. She has that power of focus. The Persephone, it struggles with focus on that practical, physical, mental level, because she's so consumed in the feeling, being receptive to the needs. And a lot of time it is the suffering.
And it's always in relation to other people, because as you say, she's the receptor, and she's always reflecting back. So that must become also quite tricky when, because we all reflect each other, but when we just reflect the shadows of other people, that could be quite chaotic for her. Because
that's where she's being like in a space of, like we say, like losing it, like really just life becomes too much. And the root of all this is that when she's so focused on she ends up being in so much suffering or dealing with so much trauma, because she's not focused on herself. That's the root of it all, because she's not focused on what inspires her, what her talents are, what her gifts are, what her service is. She's so distracted by focusing so much on the other, and it's always going to bring her pain, because no matter what, even if a partner is a great partner, she has a way of feeling she's lacking herself. So she'll always recreate a situation where she's feeling, rejected, or abandoned, or they don't show up enough for her, or she's not getting enough, because it's never possible to get what you need to be giving to yourself from anything outside yourself. So until we stop trying to get it from work, like you were saying, I mean, there are some women, if we looked at it like that, who are trying to feed themselves through the work in a way that's not, self-nurturing, then we could see that Persephone energy coming through. Because I do, like, there are some examples that I've seen with women that they're so unfulfilled, right? They're very, very successful, and meanwhile they're depressed, and nobody knows that they're depressed. That would be that kind of Persephone energy that's looking outside the self in that way.
Because also, yes, the woman, that's highly creative and highly successful, that's the creative energy. She's been able to do what she needs to do. Okay, there might be a lot of shadow side of the masculine coming in there as well. You can see all the different archetypes playing out, but giving herself totally to her career, because a lot of women now, we choose, some of us are choosing not to have children. We're choosing to go the other way. And so that creative energy needs to go somewhere. And so, but again, giving ourselves externally without first nurturing and giving to ourselves first. And this is why probably a lot of women become really burnt out and, like you say, depressed, even though they've got everything that they could dream of.
It shows the lack of bonding. So, the Venus is the creative woman. She has a partner, or like the Athena woman, she's just so focused on being the warrior, the business, accomplishing in life, but without the bonding, the higher expression of the Persephone is the power of actually merging. So, not, if we don't have a partner to do that, not everyone has a partner. So it comes down to, the bonding with self. So if we don't have a partner that we can learn how to live in a healthy bonded situation with, then it is representing that, where a lot of women who are successful in the world but are still feeling depressed, they don't have the partners, and we often see that they're not very connected to themselves as far as their just self-healing, care, and love.
So it's interesting there that you mentioned bonding. So, could this also then go back to the whole attachment theory, because a lot of us also have mother wounds, the connection, the attachment to the mother has been very unhealthy really from the get-go, that we've not learned to bond in a sacred and constructive way, which supports the totality of who we are.
Absolutely. That's so many of us. That's part of the main expression that we see in the Persephone. Like, she is often a woman who has come through so much trauma. She's come through really destructive, family situations, really unhealthy, very traumatic. She lives in like the PTSD. This is a very common experience, women who are living with a constant trying to resolve the traumas that they've experienced. So yes, the ability to bond is so fractured, and it was never healthy. So that's also part of the evolution with Persephone, that eventually, when we learn to trust ourselves, which is a quality of maturity, maturing out of the child into the, a woman, to trust ourselves that we can take care of ourselves. That's what it comes down to. We can take care of ourselves. We don't need a man to take care of us, or some success outside of ourselves. Like, we can take care of ourselves. That trust into we don't have to be defined by the trauma. That's a lot of what victimization is. We become defined by being the victim, being the trauma. And, you know, when we can get to a place of enough transmutation, we could say, or just going into the dark and dealing with it and trusting ourselves and consciously reclaiming our power back, or the understanding or the wisdom. You know, so much remains a mystery. We know that. We don't, you know, we don't really have access to fully understanding all of it, of why things happen. But you know, reclaiming those parts of ourself and pieces of ourself back to get to this place of I guess maturity, right?
And also finding our own sense of identity, because we've become so over-identified with the trauma, with that victim of ourselves, that it's given us a false sense of identity. So it's our story, you know, but also stepping into our power and realizing that when actually we can rewrite the story. We can move forward knowing who we are inside, finding out our own identity, so we can move forward in a very different way. So recreating new patterns, you know, I guess this is where the alchemist comes in. So, you know, going through that transmutation, turning water into wine, etc., etc. It's coming from being able to unravel that, but at the same time knowing that when the time is right, we can also create something new from it.
Yeah, it's really powerful, because, you know, when we think about too that like women are leading the revolution, right? Like there is this very real reality around, like, just an example that it's so interesting, but it's so real and telling, like any kind of things like this, or astrological things, or meditation, spiritual things, like when people put out calls to come and join, you know, there's like 20 women to one man. Yes. Every time, you know, like I don't think any men signed up for this, and there was like, what, 14 people you said signed up? So it's like, it's always that way. So, you know, that just shows us that we know that women are leading this revolution of healing and awakening. And, you know, we have the willingness, we have that. So it reminds me, it's a very interesting quality too, that, you know, Persephone, there's such a weakness in her because she allows herself to go into the weakest aspects of humanity, including that very dark man, that very weak, suffering, patriarchal man. But, you know, obviously we are very powerful and we know this, right? So we see that in it too. And we see that in all of the feminine archetypes, right?
And you really just have to think about the female body and what it actually goes through and what it does to realize how powerful we are. You know, even just going back to, you know, having our menses every month, you know, the fact that the body knows that it's not going to fertilize an egg and so it releases it every single month. I mean, that's just a miracle in itself. It's like, but the body knows what to do. So how can we not know our power? But it is this kind of suppression of the feminine that's come in, which is, you know, now it's all the kind of victim archetype, which is sitting on top of it all. But yes, we are powerful. The female body tells us that over and over again. And
it's
so,
like the power of vulnerability, or the strength in vulnerability. This is what women are, right? We are so sensitive, and and then it's like that full circle energy of coming from such vulnerability and such weakness, in a sense, into power and strength.
And so how can Persephone help us when it comes to astrology?
Well, basically, you know, in this way that we were talking, I don't use her all that much in readings with people because most people just aren't aware of that archetype as far as being associated with astrology, but I will look and see. So basically there's an asteroid that has been named Persephone. There's thousands of asteroids like Chiron, and there's many other ones. The most common one that most people know is Chiron, or there's other goddess ones like Hera and whatnot that a lot of astrologers are using, or Lilith. Lilith is a very well-known asteroid that astrologers are using. So I will just draw her up in the chart and see, the way astrology works is if, for instance, if Persephone or Lilith is placed in a powerful position in your chart, like it's with your sun or with your moon or these kind of things, then we can just see that it's strongly activated, and sort of break it apart a little bit more for the person. That's how we would use it.
So that will kind of give us an idea of where maybe our victim archetype is really activated.
Yeah, like I was telling you, when I started to come aware of this Persephone archetype, and then I looked in my chart, and then I saw how very strong it was placed. And then it just, starts to make a little bit more sense. And I actually have Persephone with my moon, which is interesting because the moon has to do with the mother. And I have a very intense and powerful relationship with my mother, and the whole lineage from my mother's side, my father's side of the mother is a lot of wounded mother energy going on. So that was interesting to see. It's like, yes, I'm feeling it, I'm living it, I'm witnessing it all around me, and it's right here. So yeah, that's one of the fascinating ways it can be seen in a birth chart.
So in theory, what wisdom can we really learn from Persephone moving forward? So if we're all coming into this recognition that the victim is kind of activated, and the shadow side, and this chaos theory, and being in the chaos and being emotional, but always in that moment of giving ourselves away. Right now, during this period, we're in the middle of an eclipse season. So you must have felt it yourself, and the energies that you may see when you look at the sky. How is that kind of playing out now for us as women?
Well, I think based on my own experience, what I've observed with the people all around me, we can see that this is an extremely challenging time. A lot of people are going through some of the deepest, darkest experiences of their life as far as what's like emerging from our psyches. So yeah, it's, I guess no coincidence that we're having this conversation now, because the eclipse it's very much about the Cancer Capricorn, which is the root of where we come from. It's the mother, father, it's the structure, it's the foundation that we've existed on as in humanity. So it is a time where the deepest emotional, that full moon eclipse that just happened was in Cancer. So emotional, the womb space, the mother, our lineage, like it's just all right there. So for many people, it's like the deepest patterns, the hardest, the darkest patterns have really been surfacing, and it's been extremely overwhelming. And of course, we know that it's coming up because we need to deal with it. That's also part of these times right now that obviously we see like we're at a breaking point in reality and on this earth. Like we have to make such important and strong choices. Otherwise, what's going to become of us and the earth? So I think this is definitely a time astrologically that we're being confronted. And it's very much about on the emotional level.
Yes, it's all there. It's all coming to the surface and we're all having to feel it. I think that's one of the most important things that I found is by feeling it, because we've suppressed it for so long, but just being able to embody it and allow it to come out in whichever way it needs to come out, which is healthy for us, without it overwhelming us or sending us across over to insanity and with a psychotic breakdown, for example. But being able to be with all that emotion slowly without short-circuiting the system.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. There's still a lot of people who don't have the support, which is interesting to see, you know. It's
So
really important.
why do you think they don't have the support?
Well, I think it's just still, it's one of the main patterns that is coming up to be realized and really faced, that we have not supported ourselves. We have not known how to support ourselves or each other. You know, I'm really seeing it a lot around me, how separated and alone we are. You know, a lot of people are craving community, but mostly what I see all around me is really amazing people who have so much to give and so much to share, very much on their own, struggling to get through things because because it's difficult to come together for some reason. It takes a lot to get through, like, I don't know, I want to say the matrix of what, you know, we have to deal with in the day-to-day, the responsibilities and the amount of requirements financially and all of it. So that's interesting too, the degree of separation from self and each other, and this like returning back to ourself and each other.
And finding that connection within.
Mm-hmm. You know, fractured relationship, fractured families, like that has definitely been surfacing for quite a while, you know, 30, 40 more years or so since divorce really started coming in 40, 50 years ago. And we just see the separation. And now that's also what this time so much has to do with, is seeing just how we're relating, basically. It all comes down to how we're relating to ourselves and our connection with life and with the earth planet that we live on, and then each other. So that is what's pretty much broken, that we're all trying to figure out.
And so, yes, redefining the relationship with ourselves, relating with ourselves first, and so that then we can relate to others in a much more wholehearted way.
Mm-hmm. I mean, I have hope. I do. I am hopeful for
Yes,
us and humanity, and just knowing that, you know, we do have this powerful source within of these, you know, this quality of heart and this capacity to love and expand love, you know, miles out and reach other people and really create powerful healing. Like that is happening. We know that lots, you know, many people are joining together, joining forces to create like these webs of light and sort of shift the balance that's going on the planet. So I do believe in that source of love that we are and have within, and it's just really a matter of time. But we can see that we're in like a crisis point. We've been building to this crisis point, and you know, astrologically, we can. Many people are aware around like the 2012 shift that there was a shift in consciousness and in awareness, where we started to really become more aware of ourselves and what's going on. And so there is this like building energy towards greater alignment and awareness with knowing our potential that is, streaming in and supporting us, and more, it's that whole idea of the 100 monkey concept. The more and more we all realize our capacity of love and to love, that we're shifting the earth and humanity from what it's been for so long. It's been thousands of years of patterns playing out. So we do have a lot of sort of correcting to do.
And so that's quite interesting, though, looking at it as on a collective level, and how we're at that crisis point, and also that we are in total chaos. And so this also plays out with the Persephone archetype again, where we have to enter into that chaos, because it's out of the chaos comes the calm. It's the other side of the storm, isn't it? So collectively, we are all going through it. We see it outside of ourselves all the time. But then what we see outside of ourselves is also just a reflection of what's going on inside. So it's really interesting seeing how Persephone really does play out as the reflector all the time, on an individual level and also within the collective.
Well, she's the processor, right, of emotion.
She's the IBM. She's got
the weight of all of the pain and trauma and suffering of humanity on her, that she's also receptive to and feeling. But she understands, it's that understanding that we have to process, not avoid what we're feeling, or what has happened, or what's going on. It's that repression of ourselves or the energies that lead to these, the shadow coming up, right?
And the light on the other side. Okay, so I'm going to ask, would anybody like to ask any questions? Vina.
Hello. Hi. Well, I really identified with Persephone, and you mentioned that like Venus and Aphrodite are kind of like her on the other side of the coin. So if you were like trying to balance her, would you kind of look at the qualities and attributes of like Venus and Aphrodite, perhaps?
Yeah, yes. And, everything we spoke about with Persephone, like still being that very receptive, in touch with emotion being. But the Venus, she is the one who, she's not going to die if the partnership ends. Persephone is going to go into deep suffering over the thought of the person not being connected to her. But the thing with Venus is she had multiple lovers, like at one time. So that was like that's showing that she's not attached to them. Her story goes that she's ultimately present with them. Like she becomes the muse, like she's so present as the lover, which is that expression of just being in the love and being in the beauty and being in the pleasure and being in the joy. So she's present. The thing with Persephone is Persephone can be deeply in love with her lover and not even be present because she's afraid of losing the lover. And she's bringing in all of these sort of issues. Like, I feel abandoned, or you didn't do this, or, I'm scared here of this that I want. And so, but with Venus, she's, she's not afraid. She's just like, come over, we're going to have a great night. I love you like you're the only one. And I love myself, and, I'm inspired, and let me Venus is that energy. Let me dance for you. Let me show you my art. Let me show you my mind. That's so amazing. And she's just it's that feminine that's so in touch with their power and their ability to inspire. That's the strongest It's one of the strongest archetypes of the feminine, right? That we inspire. Like we're made in this image that is beautiful, right? In this way, like this attraction principle that we have to attract in. Yeah, she really teaches to be in the creative power and to be in love. So love is the opposite of fear. Persephone tends to be in fear.
And so those two, they can come back into balance, because when we over-identify with one, it tends to mean that the other one is simply in the darkness, it's hidden in the shadow. So those are two archetypes that we can learn how to work with to bring them back into balance in our everyday life and into our relationships.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's what it's about, right? Because as Persephone is the shadow of Venus, like they are one. So Venus is also, she is bonded. You know, she does want partnership. She's there when she's there. She's just not, Venus is just, she's not the one that's dealing with the fears and the pain and suffering.
She's dealing with all the love and the light and the joy and the pleasure, which is all.
But it is her, right? They're not separate. It's just that the quality that we're calling Venus or Aphrodite is the one that she's just so centered. And it's not that she doesn't go. Actually, astrologically, Venus goes retrograde for 40 days every year. It's really beautiful. And when Venus goes retrograde during that 40-year period every year, it's said that Venus is in the underworld. So that cycle also shows us, you know, that there is a time, you know, Venus is not only, there's the shadow of Venus, right, the Persephone, where she, you know, the necessity to go and to be, like, that's also what that teaches, that Venus has a shadow, which is Persephone, right? So it's necessary for, it's just part of our reality. There is pain and suffering. This is what's going on this planet. And we have all these deep emotions. We have all this trauma that needs to be transmuted, that needs to be looked at. There needs to be the courage to walk through it, right? That's what Persephone does. She has the courage to walk through the underworld, to be the guide. But also Persephone comes back up. She doesn't live there all the time. That's the other part of the story. So she comes back up and returns to the light, to, you know, to the meadow, and lives life in the light of the earth during that time. So that's her, like, returning to the Venus, Aphrodite archetype.
Yeah. Thank you.
Anybody else?
Yep, I have a question.
Okay, please.
Thank you very much, Jessica. It was really enlightening to hear all these archetypes and what they do. I'm just wondering, for me, for some practical tips to deal with those things, like the mother shadows and things like that. You have like practical tips to deal with that effectively. I know that, you know, this is like unending, you know, cycle. We can, you know, seem to go through them and then come back. What is the most effective way of dealing with those things when they come, when we feel like we're in the shadow and we can't deal with things? Any tips?
Yeah. I'm almost wanting to pass this one over to you, Nicola. You've got the bag of tricks there of process through all this. I mean, I have lived, you know, long now with this dealing with the mother wound very strong, and the father wound, and all of this that is Persephone. It's,
So how
it's
do you
really
deal with
about,
it?
well, I think I have learned to understand this idea of witnessing, being the witness, which is such an essential like wisdom that we need to have of, when it comes, like I nowadays, like I can really see myself playing out patterns and, creating trauma and, perpetuating trauma within, or creating drama and perpetuating the trauma within myself, and sort of watching what's going on. And I think one of the things that have helped me get by through it is knowing that it will pass. I think astrology has been one of the strongest tools for me in that respect too, that we are working with cycles in such a powerful way, and emotions are very much like that too. We know that, we can get hit with a wave in the morning, and all of a sudden something can shift us, and then we're just like over it or resolved from it. And again, I know that often it can take days to get through something deep and heavy that seems to be just like all consuming and we can't get out. But trusting in this process that I think there's like a cycle, if we were to break it down, which is an interesting exercise if we were to do, but like coming into this, like when it rises up into consciousness, whatever it is trauma or this suffering or something that begins to take over our psyche, and then, knowing that there's like this dark phase of unconscious that's going to play out before we come into consciousness, before we sort of understand anything. It can just be like we're in it, and we're experiencing it. And even if we are in a witness place of realizing, often I know that this is so from my childhood. This is like such old energy that I'm just feeling it again. Or also a lot of people feel like a collective energy. Of course, there's a collective wound in humanity, especially when we talk about the feminine, the wounds of rejection and being used, and these kind of things that women have been dealing with for so long, that we can feel it, and we can feel it so intensely. And sometimes I feel like, okay, I know this is personal, but the way that I'm feeling this energy is so big that I know this is a collective energy, and there are so many other women out there feeling this too, probably obviously in this very moment, and we're all sort of feeling and feeding, like I said, this sort of engine. Sometimes I think it's like we're feeding this monster, and it's just like there. So, trusting in that we're going to get to the other side of it, and inevitably wisdom comes through, or greater understanding. Like we come out, I find with myself, I come out on the other side, and it's like I just let go of something, like another layer. I had, yet again another practice at how to deal with something so deep, and understand it. And I think what happens too is we do actually clear an aspect of our psyche, and maybe something will come back again that is on that same energy, but it's just like another layer. And on like a more practical level, I work with a lot. I definitely reach out and get support. Like recently I had a session with Nicola, like very much needed it. Like I need somebody to like hold space and help things come through, because it's taking too long. I'm just sitting in all of this. I'm not getting clarity, and I need to have someone help me move something through here. I work with flower essence a lot. Also, I found them to be really supportive. There's different flower essence companies, in the world. There's this one woman from Maine or New Hampshire that I get things from, and she makes different flower essences to do with trauma and self-worth and creative inspiration, and I just sort of drop them in my water. And I've had times where I'm feeling really intense, and I'll start using them and feel some shifts come in pretty strongly. So that's something that I go to. But maybe Nicola has some more valuable, practical
Well, I think you kind of said it all. But yes, being present with it all, because how are we going to learn if we can't sit with it? So we stay in this reactive mode over and over and over again, and we keep reacting to the same external stimuli, being triggered by the same people or different people with the same energy. And so the more that we learn how to work with that external stimuli, so we don't get triggered in the sense that we don't keep reacting to it, we just sit with it and we learn from it, because only by learning from it can we then understand what exactly it is that we are moving through and what we're healing and integrating at the same time. So, I think also support is really important. I've done the journey like many others on my own, but I have turned to people when I've known that I've needed somebody else to just shift me out of that moment because I can't get to it on my own. And I think this has been a really valuable lesson for me personally, because by reaching out, I've learned the hard way, because I've reached out to people and I've ended up with all their shadow stuff. So I've had to learn much more about my own journey. But I've also worked with practitioners. So for example, if I have the opportunity, then I'll work with an acupuncturist. I absolutely love homeopathy. I love the medicine of the homeopathy, so I'll work with homeopathy. But then also astrology. Astrology and bringing my awareness to astrology has been so powerful, because it's been able to help me to see that what I've been going through on an individual level, how it's all positioned within my birth chart. And this has really given me an understanding of what cycles I'm moving through in different times of my life. And so, for example, just to give you a brief idea, but from 2017 right up until September of this year, I've had this massive transit thing, whatever it is, going on in my chart, which has been between my second house and my 8th house, which is this whole Saturn thing. But anyway, not to go into too much detail, but this has been a real major transition for me in coming out of the wounded kind of masculine and my responsibility towards the masculine and being financially independent according to my own value. And so this has been a major transition for me, but without having that basic knowledge of astrology, I personally wouldn't know what the hell was going on. So that helps me it gives me a container. By looking at my birth chart, it gives me a container to understand what exactly it is that I'm working on in my unconscious. So what is coming to the surface, those relationships, whether it's with the mother or with the father, or, my own inner masculine, my own feminine, or whether it's with my partner, or, community, even my business. It helps me to give me that filter. So we all have tools, and I think that's really important, is to have tools that we can work with, tools which resonate with us. So for example, I might not work with flower essences, but I will work with homeopathy. And I think that's also about taking back our power, is because everybody is different. So understanding also what tools work for us is also part of reconnecting with our own power and saying, well, actually this really works for me, so I'll continue down that, rather than keep giving our power away to other people all the time, expecting other people to fix us, but finding our way to work in partnership with tools and a support system. So I hope that kind of answers your question.
Can I share one more thing?
Yes, please do.
Because you just reminded me, of course, of the astrology. That's definitely, obviously, something that I very much work with. But one of the easiest things to work with, which is so profound, is the moon cycle. And of course, we know that women are already naturally connected to it, but just briefly, what it's so amazing about it, and it definitely is a source for me. I think it's just so normal at this point that I didn't even think to mention it. But yeah, it's like the moon, from the new moon, it's like every week we basically journey into a next phase. And I always know that, for instance, we just came out of that full moon, and of course it was an eclipse, so more intense stuff came up. But it's like when there's a new moon happening and we're in this dark moon, new moon, and when you're aware of that, you can sort of tune into if a lot is coming up for you. Like, I'm in this dark phase, and I know that when the moon gets to the quarter moon, quarter moons are usually a time of where there's some sort of decision. There's some sort of something that might come up to shift gears a bit. And then the full moon, usually something comes clear, something's going to happen, almost literally, because I've been tuned into it for so long now, that when that full moon comes and the next day comes, it's like, ooh, different energy. Like, it happened again on this full moon. It was like the eclipse, everything was building so massively for 2 weeks. I felt like I didn't know how I was going to handle any more. And then the day after the new full moon, it was like, I feel better. I really feel better. And the past few days, we've been out of that full moon for 3-4 days now. It's like, it's getting a bit easier. And then we're coming up to a quarter moon soon, in a few days. And so there might be another, like, okay, make an adjustment here, something more might come up, or another shift. And then the next week after that is going to be like a real letting go cycle, releasing. And then a new sort of shift will come in at the new moon. So keeping all that in mind too helps me know that there will be a shift. It is coming, and it's coming within sort of days. Or if the full moon, like if I'm on a new moon and it's getting really intense, I'm like, the full moon in a couple weeks is going to bring something that's going to shift all this in some way. So that gives a lot of support to know that.
And I think, yes, but it's very, that also gives us that container in which to work. So when we think about ourselves as human beings, we are not just simply human beings in a body. We're connected in so many different ways. And so having the moon cycle to kind of work with it and move through. So I don't work with it on the sense of the astrology behind it, but I work with the cycles of the moon. But then also remembering that we are a body. So when we are going through those cycles, that also we have everything that we need inside of ourselves to also work through whatever stuff is coming up. Like, for instance, darkness, we only have to close our eyes and consciously work with our breath to keep us centered and to really help us to move through whatever it is that's coming to the surface without suppressing it. And these are tools which we're born with, but we just have to remember to bring our awareness to them. So darkness and the breath, and working through those cycles with these tools, so you're bringing more and more awareness into it. And yes, it's very profound when you start putting it all together, because it is the above and the below. And here we are as the axis mundi, we're the tree, we're grounded, we're here on this planet, and we're connected to everything. But the key is that as the tree blows in a storm, it's the branches that goes crazy, but the trunk of the tree remains rooted. And I really like to look at this concept, as nature within nature, that if we are able to stand rooted in, while all that chaos is going on, then we actually gain much more wisdom from it at the end. And then we go through the cycles and the seasons and the changes of the moon. Really powerful. So any other questions, ladies? No? Okay, well, it's been an absolute pleasure to kind of get together with you all. Thank you so much, Jessica, for joining us all the way from Hawaii. in the middle of your monsoon storms. And in fact, this has been one of my major triggers. You know, we're 11 hours difference, so having to work my time zones with different time zone has really been a major trigger, but a beautiful experience, kicking me out of my comfort zone. So thank you so much. And if you do want to, you know, find out about your birth chart and you want to know more about astrology, then Jessica also offers a beautiful soul map, and she'll do your reading for you. So she's over at templesofthemoon.com if you would like to know more. And now that you understand how the beautiful Jessica works in regards to the feminine, and you've got all this stuff coming up, then this is your girl. And just finally, on another note, that okay, we are both a bit lastminute.com, but next week, and we go into a new lunar cycle. A week on Friday, we start a new lunar cycle. So the two of us, we're going to be hosting a 4-week online journey. So basically, it's called Psyche: Reclaiming the Medicine of the Feminine and Our Rites of Passage Through the Cycles of the Moon. So together we're going to be hosting this workshop. It's going to be over 1 lunar cycle. And we're going to be looking at what's going on up in the sky and what's going on in the unconscious. So we're going to bring all that together. And so if you want to know any more, then please just send us a message and we'll happily be in touch.
Yeah.
So ladies, thank you so much. It's been a real pleasure.
Thank you.
Thank you. A real honor. And thank you so much, Jessica. Thank you.
Much. Yeah.
Your wisdom is radiant and beautiful as ever. Thank you.
Much. Aloha, everyone.
Aloha. See, yes. Aloha. And we've got ciao. So ladies, thank you so much for joining us. And until next time.